So I came back. I owned a tattoo shop at that time in my life as well. And so when I came back off that tour, I just happened to be looking at blabbermouth.net, and there was a story where Slash is, saying he's putting together the project, and there are no real rock frontmen around anymore. They've been listening to hundreds of demos, and so I was like, I come from, even though I play, I have a pretty strange career. I started in the late 80s with Atheist, which is a groundbreaking jazz fusion death metal band when there wasn't anything like that. And so we were known for sort of creating technical metal, and sort of Rush meets Slayer. It's really, really interesting. And that band broke up in '93, and I put Neurotica together and moved out. But I've always had this. I come from that where David Lee Roth is a god. Singers. You know what I mean? They're the idea of a rock singer gets sort of stifled in a metal setting. But I still have that at heart. I'm still that guy. I like to not take myself too seriously and yada yada. So when I saw that, I was like, fuck that. So I called my manager at the time. It was a guy named Doug Kay, and I was like, hey man, let's send him the Neurotica record. And he was like, in his defense, he's probably right. He's like, he's in LA, he can handpick anybody. Well, why is he going to choose you? And I was like, well, first of all, thanks. And then I just, and he pretty much said no, and I didn't get too mad about it at that time. I just remembered that our publicist for Neurotica, who worked at Koch Records, a girl named Lulu, had been Slash's publicist prior to that. And I remember her telling me that story just randomly. And I was like, shit, I'm going to call her. And I called her. And because it was a pretty big announcement when Slash said, after they played the Randy Castillo gig with Josh Todd, I think, that kind of opened their eyes to, hey, maybe we should get together and write some music. And then so when that came about, I reached out to her, and she immediately, before I even finished the sentence, was like, oh, I'm going to send it to him right away. I'll send him the Neurotica record. So fast forward a few days later, and I missed the call initially from Slash. I went to voicemail. I was at a bar having a drink, and I go out to have a cigarette, and I check my voicemail, and there it is, and it's Slash. And so I remember going back in and talking to the guys that I was sitting with. I was like, never going to fucking believe who's on my voicemail right now. And they were like, who? And I was like, Slash just called me. And they were like, what? And so I passed the phone around, and let them all listen. And it was cool, man. Keep in mind, I'm an underground metal guy. My band was there in the very early stages of extreme metal. And so that's been my MO, And so, Slash is kind of like the Joe Perry of my generation. You know what I mean? He's the Keith Richards of my generation, but way better guitar player. Keith Richards. So I was just like, I thought it was cool. So I called him back, and he said, he's like, yeah, me and Duff, we've been listening to just hundreds of demos, and we actually sat and listened to this whole record. What happened to this band? And I said, yeah, I explained what happened, and we just we called it a day after going through about 8 years of shit. And he was like, okay, well, we've written like 36 songs, and so I'm going to send you 3. Just write your lyrics and record them and send them back. So I was like, okay. So I waited, and I got a package from Saul Hudson, and the return address. And I wish I kept it. I did not keep it. I'm terrible about keeping things. I still regret that because it was. I remember getting it.
What stamps did he use? Do you remember that?
I do not. I do not. But I mean, just seeing Saul Hudson on that, I thought that's fucking great, man.
Sure.
And I mean, what's he gonna write? Slash? Of course he had to write his real name.
He might though.
Nah, he's too cool, man. Slash is like, he's got less attitude than some of the some local musicians I've met over the years. You know what I mean? Very cool guy. And so they sent me these songs, man, and I'll never forget it, man. I got in my car and I rode around and I listened to it. I was like, all right. So I went in the studio and did my thing, sent it back, and like 3 days later, I got a conference call with him and Duff, and they were like, "Can you come out to LA?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I said, "On my dime," and they were like, "Yep." And I was like, "Shit." So then I was faced with the scenario of having to figure out, I had to come up with some bucks to I hadn't been paid for the tour that I had been on just at that point. So I
fly you out? Whatever. What's that? I mean, I'm not here to go in anyone else's pocket, but they couldn't fly you out at least. Come on.
It was a hazing, man. I believe I think it was purposeful, and
Okay.
I guess kind of expected. And I usually leave that part out of the story. I mean, just because it sounds, I don't want to be derogatory to those guys because they couldn't have been
Oh,
more kind. But I think that's, why should they? They're fucking kings. I mean, why should they fly me out there? As an opportunity for me. If I can't find my way out to LA, then it's
fair.
almost like a job interview. I mean, if you want to work here, you got to be here.
You know what?
So
That's fair. Good
I
point.
fucking went out, and who I got to pay for it was the manager, who said, "Oh, come on, man. Slash is in LA." I was like, "Yeah, hey, you can pay for it. You can help me pay for it." He had a bunny.
Nice.
He was doing well financially, so he was like, he was really blown away as well. He was like, "Good for you, man." And because I'm like, listen, everybody shits and wipes their ass the same. I know how musicians are. The most humble, kind Brian Johnson, AC/DC, one of the kindest, most sincere, humble people you'll ever meet in your life. Like, I know that deep down inside that there's that persona that everybody has put on them, but most of them, people that are successful are very kind and not, aloft like people might think. So I get on. And I was really excited when they both called. They were like, "Yeah, we love it. And this is great." And come out here. And so I went out there, and I was really prepared. I mean, and I'm not sure that they were prepared for my preparedness.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Because keep in mind, I've been a Guns N' Roses fan since the beginning, and I used to work construction and listen to it on the job site, and even though I was into really heavy music as well, I always had appreciation for Guns N' Roses. And I think even the hardcore metal people back then at least had an appreciation for the grime of GNR, especially
Hmm.
compared to like Poison and all that garbage. Guns N' Roses had balls. They had moxie. So I go out there, and Matt Sorum picks me up from the airport, and I'm like, holy fuck, this is cool, because I was a big Cult fan too.
Sure.
And so it was, for again, for a death metal guy, I was outside of my element. And so we drive to my hotel, drop my shit off, jump back in the truck, and head to Mate, which was a rehearsal studio in LA that kind of everybody goes to prepare for tours. And so, like, at that time, like, Thin Lizzy was there, and oddly, Sebastian Bach was also there rehearsing for a tour. And they had cameras set up in there, and they had everything was being recorded. So I was like, here we go. But before we went in, smoking a cigarette outside, and a Jaguar pulls up, and out comes Slash, and like a cartoon character. I mean, just literally looks like, I mean, we're talking about a guy that can be recognized by his silhouette. There's not a lot of rock stars that you could recognize from 100 yards from a silhouette.
I've said
So
that on the podcast,
have you?
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the Michael Jackson or the Michael Jordan thing, like
Mhm.
Slash is that. So he comes up, man, and he's like, "Hey, how's it going?" Just super cool, very laid back. And we went inside, and I pulled out all my papers, and then he says, again, not knowing where I come from, and he says, "So do you have any earplugs?" And I said, "No, no, no." And he's like, "It's pretty loud, so I just want to let you know we're earplugs." And I'm thinking, shit, man, I've been standing in front of death metal guitars for fucking 15, 20 years,
Right?
loud as shit in a small rehearsal room. So I just kind of laughed it off. Said, "No, I'm good, I'm good." And so we proceeded to jam, man, and it was fucking great. It was really, really good. And we got to the end of the third song, and it was kind of like, my vocal style is not unlike Axl in a way. It's a little higher than normal. It's a little raunchy and raspy, and I've been around bands long enough to recognize when the band is like, "Oh, I gotta get this guy out of here," and they were looking at each other like, "Hey, right," and so I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go smoke a cigarette," because I could tell they wanted to talk.
Mm.
And so I go out and I smoke a cigarette, and um, I'll never forget. Duff comes out, and he looks at me from across the parking lot, and he goes, and I was thinking,
Thumbs
"What's
up.
happening? I got the job," or So then I walk over to him, and he's like, "Hey, can you stay over the weekend?" So now I'm faced with another hotel dilemma. So I have to call. I
Mm.
have to call the manager back and say, "Hey, man, they want me to stay for the weekend until Monday." So he's like, "Yeah, I'll pay for it. I'll pay for it." So yeah, we rehearsed another day, and so we had two really, really good days. We went out to eat together, had great conversation, and Duff picked me up the second day, and we went through a car wash with his car, which was completely insane for me. Like just like anybody else, like, it's just never mind. It's just Duff from Guns N' Roses getting his car, like, sitting there with that wooden stick in his hand. You know, we're sitting on the bench waiting for them to call his name so he can get in his car.
Yeah.
But just, you know, really cool guy. He reminded me a lot. I'm friends with Scotty Hill from Skid Row.
Okay.
They actually talk a lot, very similar. And they
Mm.
came up in the same era. So I don't know. I just felt really comfortable with Duff. Probably the most comfortable with Duff. He just seemed you know, very candid and transparent about all the shit he'd been through with drugs and because he was in great shape. I was like, man, really, you know, you must be working out or something. He's like, yeah, you know, I took Wellbutrin and all these different things to quit smoking and blah blah blah. And yeah, he was super lucid and clear and great. So not to tell you the big long story, but so anyway, so Sunday comes around. I'm supposed to meet up with him on Monday for one last rehearsal, and I'm out at like this really packed bar in LA with a bass player from a band called OTEP, and who was on the Ozfest tour with me. And I get a call from Slash, and he's like, "Hey, we're in the studio right now. Can you come?" And I was like, "Where is it?" And I've already had a couple drinks. You know, I'm not supposed to see them today or anything. And he's like, "It's in the Valley." And so I asked him, I was like, "Where's the Valley?" And he was like, "Oh man, it's like 1 a.m. So I'm like, "Shit." And he's like, "Man, it's 45, 50 minutes outside of the city." So I was like, and he's like, I'll take you. So he takes me in the studio that we went to was the place where they did Appetite. And it was covered in barbed wire, and it looked like an abandoned building from the outside. It just looked super sketchy. And, you know, again, by now it's, I don't know, you know, probably 1:45 a.m. So and there's a gate, and I bring myself in and I go in. And so as I'm walking down the hall, I can hear Slash soloing in one of the rooms. And so I was like, oh man, cool, you know. So anyway, fast forward, it turns out on that day is the day that Izzy split. And so they told me what happened, and they're like, yeah, you know, we're working on this song. I'm gonna do it. Slash like, I'm gonna do a solo, and then we're gonna split. And I was like, okay. And mind you, I never even heard this fucking song or anything, so I had to on the spot sit there and write lyrics for it, and do the vocal. And we did. I sat with the engineers until probably 4 a.m, and then I had no way to get back to my hotel. And so I literally had to again call my manager and get him to call the cab company, give them the credit card so I could get out of there and go back. So the next day I go into rehearsal with them, and you know, I sat on the couch with Slash, and he was like, man, you know, he was talking to me about Josh Todd and guys like that, you know, some of the guys that they had auditioned and why it didn't work out. And even Sebastian Bach, he was like, yeah, he literally said, you know, I just don't think Skid Roses would be something that, you know, that we should probably do. Sebastian's an old friend and blah blah blah. He's just really candid about it, which is cool. And he said, you know, I don't know where we're gonna go, I don't know which way. He says, but right now, you're my guy. He's like, you're my guy. So I was like, awesome. He goes, no matter what happens, like, you're a fucking great singer. And I've told this story on a number of other occasions to metal magazines and stuff. That was the first time, even though Brian Johnson gave me, you know, worked with me on my vocals, and so that was the first time I really felt like a rock singer. I was like, cool, man. You know, I mean, I'll take that and put it in my pocket. And so anyway, it was real cool. And I flew back to Florida, and then what happened was, I mean, Weiland and Weiland's wife and Duff's wife were really good friends, and obviously they got the inside scoop. And then, you know, I mean, but Rolling Stone ran an article. I'm sure you've probably seen it if you're an enthusiast, where it was all about Velvet Revolver and what was happening. And the 4 pictures they used were Sebastian, Travis Meeks, myself, and Scott Weiland. And so yeah, I mean, for an audition that I never got, it was an incredible experience. And you know, I treasure it. And I lost those. The reason those resurfaced a couple of weeks ago is because I lost my copy of my demo. And so, like, a late night, one night, just like I'm sitting out here in this very spot, and I found them online. I remembered somebody maybe gave them a copy of it or something, and sure enough, I found it. And so I just randomly posted like 1:30 in the morning, and then woke up the next day, and it was all over the place, and my phone was all blowing up, and I was like, that's cool, you know. I mean, there was just a lot of people in my world of atheists that had no idea that happened either, and so it's just kind of like this. I call it sort of the catfishing moment.